and welcome to Aligned on AI, the podcast where we have real conversations with business leaders about what is changing in their industries and where AI will actually help. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Diloia, based near Buffalo in the US, who works with businesses on operational improvement, leadership development, and organizational transformation through his consulting practice, AXIOM Coaching. So, Steve has worked across engineering, quality management, and consulting roles before building a career helping businesses improve how they actually operate day to day. In many ways, that experience sits right at the center of the AI conversation today because technology can only work effectively when the underlying processes are clear and well designed. One of the themes we explore today is the idea that AI is not a magic button you press and suddenly the business runs perfectly. If that were true, we would all be on a beach somewhere, letting the robots run the company. Unfortunately for some people, unfortunately for consultants like Steve and I, a big part of the work is still about people, processes, and leadership. We also talk about something of a recurring theme. AI can remove the administrative burden that keeps talented people stuck in spreadsheets and paperwork all day, but if the underlying process is unclear, AI simply helps you make mistakes faster. Steve has put it to me, automation without standardization is just chaos at speed. So in this conversation, we explore the realities of operational improvement, how small and medium-sized manufacturers actually run their businesses, where technology can realistically help, and why leadership and culture still matter far more than any new tool. So Steve, welcome. Could you start by telling us a little bit about your background and career?
Thank you, Carl. Yes, so I graduated with an aerospace engineering degree and then have over the 30 some years that I've been working. I was process engineer at Motorola, then moved into a smaller company and was their quality engineer, or sorry, process engineer and quality manager. And then got into a consulting firm, learned more consulting, more of the consulting side of the business, not so much the skill set or the experience, although it obviously did give me more experience. And then after about 14 years or so with that firm, I decided to go out on my own and do my own thing. And that's how Axiom Coaching was born. It was partly born from the fact that I did go through coaching certification and training, and the firm that I was with wasn't giving me enough of that coaching type experience or opportunity. So that part kind of pushed me to start my own thing.
That sounds good. So during your time working with companies such as Motorola, like you mentioned there, you were obviously exposed to many different suppliers and industries. What lessons from that period still shape how you're working today? I'm sure there's a few small nuggets there.
So it shaped me a lot in the fact that it actually helped me kind of prepare for the consulting world. Since my time there, I was a process engineer on the floor and did a lot of the manufacturing there at the plant. And then my boss at the time moved into supplier quality and supplier control and asked me to bring the skill sets of process engineering, Six Sigma, black belt, and those types of skill sets that I had to the supply base, not only to manage the supply base, but to actually kind of be their consultant and help them improve. So I really got a lot of experience going into diverse types of industries across the country and even the world, traveling around the world to our supply base. So I got to experience different cultures, different, not only just different cultures in a business, because each business has its own culture, but actually different cultures around the world and see how they did business. And so it gave me a lot of background in kind of managing around different ideas, different cultures, different mindsets. And it really helped prepare, I think, me for this role in consulting by learning that more. Yeah, it was great to see the different industries and things like that, but it was the people aspect and the cultural aspect that really kind of had an impact on me.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually. So, I mean, what was there any particular differences that you could pull out about the cultural differences that really helped you sort of, don't know, maybe take a preference for a particular way about, going about work? What can you tell me about that?
It just was fascinating to see. So worldwide, the difference between obviously kind of the Eastern Asian type of culture at the time when I was doing this, and some of their philosophies and ideas of leadership, of culture, of how they manage their business, compared to more of a Western. Spent time in France, and it was interesting to see even a difference in kind of philosophy there, where there's a much more of a, I don't mean this in a derogative, I think it's a good, healthy, there was more of a laid back kind of, yes, we do our job, but our job is not our life, which is quite different than the American philosophy, where we define everything basically, this is my job defines who I am. And
Right. Yeah.
we work to live, as opposed to kind of that French philosophy of live, but not live to work, or whatever. So that was kind of refreshing and interesting. And then even in America, to see the different kind of philosophies and styles from north, south, east, west. There's just such a diverse of cultural and ideologies, again, in the southern states. And again, none of this is derogative, it's just a different culture. A little bit slower than north. West is a little bit laid back than east. And so it was just really kind of interesting to see the diversity in different countries, and like I said, around the world, towards this work ethic or culture. And they all work. It's just, how do you make those cultural differences work within the business and make sure the business still succeeds?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess what you're saying is, it isn't such that one culture is better than another. It's just a different way about going about your work, and probably suits different people, probably from different parts of the world as well, which is interesting as well. So I mean, I guess then you've seen all these cultural differences, you've seen all these corporate differences as well. Did you feel like you needed to bring a certain type of culture in with your coaching when you started AXIOM, or were you trying to solve a particular problem that you didn't see other businesses solving? Could you see some angles there that you thought, what, I can bring this experience to other companies in a particular way?
Absolutely. Great question. It's not so much bringing a defined culture into a business. It's either helping them identify their culture, or if it's somewhat established, helping build that culture, if it's a successful culture, and making sure leadership and planning and objectives and goals help support the culture that is within that organization. And if they don't have a culture, like it's just kind of chaos, managed chaos, helping them realize you have to establish a culture through leadership, through policies, through goals, objectives, but also through your hiring practice. So you just can't hire anybody. You have to, if they look great on paper and then they do a great job interviewing, that's great. But personality and everything else, will they fit in your culture? Because that's a big part. If you bring somebody in that's going to not fit, they're going to upset your dynamic, and it's just not going to be a good time for themselves, for you as a leader, and for your organization. So it's really that holistic look at a person when you're bringing them in. Not only do they have the skills, will they help support the culture and that we're trying to develop and maintain within our organization. Again, it's not bringing a culture, it's what kind of culture do you have, strengthen it and make sure we maintain it. Or if you want to tear it down, what kind of culture do you want? Because right now, either it's not defined or it's kind of, like I said, kind of controlled chaos. So let's start making the plan to establish the culture you want and put in a roadmap for moving you towards that culture.
Yeah. And it's really, if you put someone on the spot and ask them, what kind of culture have you got in your business, whether you're at an interview to be hired, and even the other direction as well, if you're asking that sort of question to, a potential new employee, it's actually really hard to pinpoint unless you really experienced it, unless you felt something and you felt like you belong within that sort of culture. You don't know, really, do you? It's quite hard to really put that into words until you properly felt it and really experienced it.
It is. It's largely, though, if you have core values, and every organization says they have values, and sometimes they have too many. I know organizations that have like 8 or 10 core values. I'm like, really? All 10 of these? And what people don't realize is when you say you have a core value, that means you do not violate that value come hell or high water, to put it bluntly. This is a value that we will not violate. If you're going to violate that value, it's not a core value. So really, core values should be around 3 to 4, maybe 5, but 5's even pushing it because there tends to be overlap. So it's knowing those core values and then kind of asking the questions of the person you're interviewing, questions around those values to see if they have the same values of the organization. And then just having conversations with them, not necessarily asking them about the job, but their experience from past organizations, what they liked, what they didn't like. And you start to get that feel for, are they going to be a fit based on what they did and didn't like from their past employees or employment, and how they answer, like I said, those side questions around core values to see if they will reinforce the core values that you want within your culture.
Yeah, I think there's quite a skill to that. I think, I've worked in small businesses, maybe 20, 25, even smaller than that. And it's really important to get the right people on board because, you are forming quite a small, compact sort of unit. You're a small family working together. You're going to spend a lot of time with the same people for many hours a week. So yeah, it's actually a really important one. It may well change as well, obviously, when, I don't know, you're bringing in new technologies with AI. I don't want to talk about that specifically now, but it's an interesting aspect. I mean, going between the different sort of size sort of businesses that you've worked with, I mean, do you see the same sort of common operational problems with each, or are there different sort of issues that you're going to be looking for?
Unfortunately, no. There's big, medium, small, while they do have sometimes different problems, such as sometimes smaller businesses obviously have more of a cash flow issue than a larger, more established organization. And so there are some side differences. Smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses have a tougher time sometimes growing than larger businesses. Not that larger companies or organizations don't have trouble growing it sometimes, but again, a smaller, medium size trying to get their share of the market is sometimes a little bit tougher. But there are common issues across all organizations that I'm really seeing very common this day in, currently. And that would be, I would say, leadership issues and the focus or lack of focus on quality. Everybody talks about quality, but when you boil it down to, quality is kind of the first thing to go. So, are we going to ship the product on time, or are we going to hold it for quality issues or extra inspection or something to make sure that we're doing the right thing and take a little bit more time? And the decision usually is we're going to ship the product and override quality. So again, a lot of organizations talk a good game about quality, but when it comes down to it, it's really the kind of the last thing that is thought of initially through the process. And again, that kind of relates back to leadership and the strength of the leadership, the strength of them to hold true to, again, those core values, their mission, their strategy, their business ideas, and holding people accountable. I see that a lot of it is a big issue. And I think part of it is because of the change in things that have happened since COVID and in the global environment that we're in. Trying to find good people has become a hard thing. And so they're afraid to hold people accountable, lose that person, and then, oh, what am I going to do to fill that person? Because we need someone to fill that position. But the long term, they don't understand. I think leadership, that fear keeps them from acting. And it's better to act and remove the person who either, like we were saying, doesn't fit the culture or is a troublesome problem employee. They cause more damage than getting rid of them and trying to limp along without them.
Yeah.
Other people, the morale will increase. Other people will pick up the slack. If you keep that problem person in a position, resentment starts, morale goes down, productivity goes down. And your good employees start to back off and say, you know what, I'm just going to do my 8 hours. I'm not doing overtime for you. I'm not doing everything, because that person gets a raise just like I do. They get a bonus just like I do. And yet they're the worst employee in the world. Why are they getting the
Yeah.
same as me? So really, that's a common theme that I see with leadership, is that fear to get rid of that problem employee, which again, in the long term will help you out. And I've had organizations see that, where they finally did pull the trigger, that bad employee went away, and the culture, the morale, the productivity, just everything lightened within the organization. You could see the difference, feel the difference, and see people happier to come to work, and it just worked out really well.
Yeah, and I've seen it myself over the years as well, that exact thing happening. And you do, the good in you wants to really stick by people, help them sort of just improve and just develop their skills and get better and better. But it's the old adage, you can take a horse to water, and you can spend a lot of time taking that horse to water, but if that horse isn't going to drink, then you're banging your head against a brick wall potentially, and you risk bringing down the rest of your staff and potentially losing that staff. And particularly in times when recruitment is difficult, we've had a lot of issues over the years in the UK, finding even options to employ new staff, let alone the best option. It's been really difficult. And of course, losing a member of staff for a smallish sort of company makes a big difference. That's quite a big percentage change. So it's quite a big decision. But yeah, you've got to stay brave, because you'll probably see the positive out of it pretty quickly, no doubt.
Yes.
Do you think there's any? I was just going to move on a little bit to you raised the common problem that you see around quality. Do you think there's any still maybe lingering misconceptions about what quality is? That it doesn't mean that high quality means that it's a Rolls-Royce product. It is about consistency, and efficiency is about how you're getting something produced in a consistent way that gives that customer experience, or a good product at the end of it, that you're going to get, the customer or the client is going to get what they expect consistently. What do you see? Is it still an issue? If people is there a misconception there about what the quality actually means?
I think that's part of it, and maybe a small part of it, that and I ran into this when I was a quality manager, that inspectors would come to me and say, I want to reject this part. And I'm like, why? Well, it's close to being out of spec. Well, close and out are two different things. So
Yeah.
does it meet the drawing? Yes. Well, that's what the customer wants. So it's a good product. Ship it. If it's out of spec, absolutely, we're not going to ship it. But if it's within the specifications of what the customer wants, even if it's close to being out, it's still in. They've given us that boundary. So definitely that's a small part. I think the bigger part is understanding, especially most of the clients that I work with are certified to some standard. They have to be, because their client or their customers have demanded it. They have pushed that requirement down. I think they don't understand the standards and the requirements, and they don't understand the whys behind it. And they just look for, and it's common for humans to do this, the path of least resistance. And sometimes quality is not that path, and there's a reason for it. If you do the work upfront and put that extra time in, and it's not the path of least resistance, there is some resistance to make sure you're getting everything right and set up and planned. Then when it gets down to the backside and closer to your customer, there's a greater chance that it's going to be a good product or a good service that you're providing to your customer. And I think all that prep and the planning and the, like we had talked about, or you did in the introduction, the standardization of processes and holding people accountable to those standard processes, not allowing them to kind of veer off and do their own thing. All of that is, I think, a combination of the misunderstanding truly about quality and why we put these things in place when we put a quality system in place. And you try and explain it to people, and they still, like I said, path of least resistance. Well, can I do it this way? No. You can keep asking me for different routes, but no, you have to go down this route, because it's the only way that will ensure or mitigate the risk of poor product or service going out.
Yeah, you're right. And there are multiple reasons for why a process develops in the direction that it does. And not all of that needs to be known by every person along the route in that process. But there's got to be some trust there, hasn't there, from for the leadership taking the right approach. Yes, you can provide some improvement suggestions there, but they need to understand why it might not be accepted as a better result overall. I mean, we've touched on that there, but why do process discipline and standardization matter so much for operational improvement, maybe quality as well? And why should that end up meaning that there are people who are maybe not able to really perform so well? I know you've got a lot of experience in manufacturing. I've got a lot of more experience overall in my career in consulting. So they're two different things. I know you obviously give coach and consulting yourself, but how can you relate that to those situations?
So I would say that the thing that I tell my clients, even when I was a process engineer, quality manager, and those types of things, I say the same thing to my clients. That number one, standardization is so critical to understanding your process and reducing the variability of whatever. Again, whether I do help service industry and manufacturers. So whether you're providing a service, just like I do, I provide consulting, I provide coaching. It's a service. It's not necessarily a product. So whether you're doing that or providing a product, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's ensuring that the variability of that, what you're providing, is consistent. And so your customers, hopefully repeat customers, know what they're going to get each time they're dealing with you, that it's a consistent thing. The other thing that's really important is if it's standardized, it's easier to train. And you know that your people are going to train new people coming in the same way. They're not going to train them to the way they do it. They're going to train it to the way that everybody else does it. So again, we have consistency and standardization, which makes it easier to train, makes it easier to cross-train across the organization to give you flexibility. And then finally, it's so much easier to do root cause analysis and continuous improvement if everything is standardized. And I've said this when I was a process engineer. And I say this when sometimes clients will come in and say, hey, we don't need help with our organization. Our organization's fine, but this process just keeps failing. And first thing I ask is it standardized? And typically it's no. Well, I don't know what the problem is because now I've got 6 operators doing 6 different things. So now we have to narrow it first, get everybody standardized and see if the problem goes away or if the problem was because somebody was doing something different. So it makes root cause analysis very hard. If it's standardized, you can easily ask, did everybody follow the process? Yes. Okay. So now that we know, we can either eliminate that it was a process problem and see if it's some other outside force. It could be material, it could have been misinformation if it's a service industry, but we now can look outside the process if we know that it's standardized and everybody followed it. It just makes root cause and continuous improvement so much easier.
Yeah. Do you ever see any leadership or cultural barriers that are preventing organizations from improving how they operate? Maybe resistance to standardizing things? I don't know. What do you see?
All the time. I hear, leaders saying, yeah, well, what's the difference? They got the product out and, the product's good well, they came up with a creative way to an issue and continued the process going. And it's like, yeah, but number one, you let them do that time, they're going to continue to do that. So sooner or later, it's going to come around and bite you, and you're lucky it didn't this time. So there was a huge risk, but luckily we avoided the risk going into something bad happening, causing defects, scrap, or, a failure out in the field, which we definitely don't want. And so how many times are you going to allow people to circumvent the system until it really causes problems? And we see it in the news on a regular basis. Recalls, safety recalls, food recalls, all of this. And it's typically because, again, leadership has gotten laxed and now people are doing the things that they want to do, either taking shortcuts or coming up with new processes, and they're missing the critical steps that would have avoided the problems that got out into the consumer market.
Yeah. And obviously this segues a little bit into AI here. There's a lot of businesses who will be thinking about AI, maybe started the adoption process. But actually to actually adopt AI, it's a bit of, once you start, you're on a bit of a track with this. You're always going to go in one direction. Can you explain why it is so important for process clarity to come before that adoption, before automation, or before AI implementation? And what are the risks to organizations if they try and do this when there's an inefficient or poorly defined system or process?
So number one is, it doesn't matter whether you're doing, this problem started with automation. So even when you're doing robotics and automation, if your process isn't defined, again, what are you going to tell the robot to do? It's just a machine with programming. It doesn't think or have the knowledge to say, oh no, I should do this. So you need to establish that process even with automation, but especially with AI, because AI, again, is basically programming software, right? You're telling the software what you want it to do, or tasks you want it to accomplish. And if you don't have an established process and good inputs into the AI, again, you're just going to get mistakes or junk coming out. And so there has to be that time to stabilize the process, understand the process, and then that not only helps you program the AI, but it also helps you identify where you want to put in AI and need it. So as you have that established process, you can, as you've been hinting, AI is, and I've told this to my clients, because especially when I'm working with a team, you can see the fear on some of the employees that AI is going to take my place. And it's like, no, AI is going to remove all that administrative stuff that you should not be spending time on, and let you spend on what we call the value added, the things your customer wants. So if it's customer service, you can focus on servicing your customers, not putting their data into the system. That does not help the customer at all. What helps the customer is you talking them through their problem and adding that service value, and let AI do the administrative work so you can spend more time with your customer. Same thing with manufacturing. Get rid of the administrative work so that the people can focus on what they need to do, which is producing a good part. Focus on that. And then all the data and everything should be managed by or could be managed by AI. And there still needs that human involvement, though, to do a scrub of the data, to make sure that the system's working properly, and to further understand it. Because AI is going to only take you so far. And again, unless you program in the prompt or whatever, all of the different scenarios, that's going to be impossible. So you're still going to need that human factor to really kind of look at what AI has produced out from the data analysis and make sure it makes sense, or even take it into a further analysis down a path that, again, you couldn't program in every scenario. So now you see a different scenario, and it could be a rare one that hardly ever pops up. So why would you put it in? And so now you're going to fix that problem that comes up maybe once a year or something like that. That's very rare. So there's a lot of the foundational work that I don't think people are thinking through when they start using AI. And I know they aren't, because I've seen it and I've experienced it.
Right.
It
Okay.
becomes very frustrating.
Yeah. I guess there's some pressure there, isn't there, to act quickly and not get left behind. But yeah, you could end up with a false start if you're not too careful and go down a rabbit hole with this. I mean, just as you were talking there, it does feel a little bit like, well, there's two things came to mind really. One is, a business may have built up a lot of internal knowledge and experience over the years, and that's formed maybe the backbone for the little evolutionary aspects of the process, little refinements that have gone on for good reason over time, not just for the sake of it, lessons learned and things that have been spotted. And if you don't have a good externalized sort of form of that AI can use as a baseline saying this is our benchmark from where we're starting, this is good as we are today, hopefully, and a good solid foundation as well to really base all of the decisions that are made moving forwards. And hopefully AI will obviously improve. I'm no doubt, it feels like it will be going through a learning phase over the next period, whatever period that might be. Maybe there's a learning period there as well for the businesses that were teaching AI. But yeah, once that's in place, AI should be able to suggest improvements without people really spotting that there were maybe opportunities for improvement. Maybe, as you've suggested yourself, preempting problems that it would be maybe too complex to foresee that particular problem occurring to a human. And they don't have time to think about this, whereas AI is just working 24 hours a day spotting these things, and it's got a particular task there to help it achieve that. So it will be interesting to see. I mean, where do you think realistically AI will start to help businesses, first and foremost, whichever businesses maybe you've seen it start to help them? Have you got some thoughts or examples on that?
Again, to me, I think the first is the administrative part. It's removing the tasks that, again, tend to be a burden or pull people away from what is valuable to the organization and valuable to the customer. Again, entering in data or re-entering in data. And I've seen this with manufacturers and service industries. Data may come in through a web portal or whatever, but then there's not a solid connection or anything that's dissecting the information to put it into the system. So you have a ton of information that someone has to read through and pick out what needs to go into your system. No, that AI can easily do that if it's, again, programmed properly and you've thought through the process, and more importantly, validated that AI is doing what it's supposed to do before you just plug it in. And that's a big problem that I see, is people just come up with AI solution, plug it, and there was no validation or testing. And it's like, really? You're causing more problems. Sorry to say this. I don't want to pick on podcasters, but I've seen this you can see this AI. I don't know if there's this one AI solution or software for podcasters for sending out emails and everything. But to me, it becomes sometimes less efficient than the old way of just send me your calendar link and I can choose, as opposed to this cycle of emails where AI keeps sending me dates that I keep saying I'm not available on those days. And it sends me the same days back at a different time. And it's like, you didn't understand. I said I'm not available Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So don't send me those dates. So it becomes very frustrating. And again, to me, that's evidence of someone bought the software, did a little programming, and never validated it by testing to see different responses from the people that they're trying to get. And so again, think through your process and then have AI do it and validate that the outputs are going to be good. And again, as I said, the first stroke I think any business should take is the administrative strokes. Get rid of that stuff from your people so that they can focus more on the important parts of the business and not this administrative side work that takes them away or chews up their time. Then once you've got that kind of down and perfected, it's giving you more experience and understanding of how AI works, what we need to do to make AI work, what we did to validate to make sure it works, then start implementing maybe into more complicated processes or systems. But administrative stuff is the easiest for AI to handle. So I think that's the area where people should start first in their organizations. And most people are, but I also see them starting to look at very quickly, well, what are the complicated areas that we can have AI do? And like I said, baby steps. Let's learn how to walk before we run. And so I think that would be the key message for most organizations. Start with your administrative work, get that down, understand how AI works through that. And that's your kind of practice ground. Then once you've perfected that, move to the more complex systems.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely right. It's part of the reason why I put together an adoption framework. Really is a solid sort of foundation for people. You have to take the people with them. There is an educational sort of parallel, if not upfront process that needs to be implemented with the teams. If you're not able to take the team with you on the journey right from the start, then you're facing an uphill battle. What it occurred to me then, the way that you put it was such that there is actually a process within a process here. You need a process to really implement to a sensible quality level AI, and it does need that validation. It does need these baby steps. It does need to be an evolutionary sort of process. And people get excited, they maybe know a little bit about AI and they see the potential of it, but that potential is not within the grasp straight away. It has to be sort of strived for. It has to be worked hard to achieve. But it is an exciting prospect. But yeah, it's just got to rein in that excitement and just get the early benefits of it, get the early hanging fruit. And yeah, especially alongside when we talked earlier about, obviously all businesses want to grow, they want to become more efficient. They want more profit, but recruitment potentially might be one of the things that's holding them back. With AI, you're potentially able to grow without having to recruit. You don't need to lay off people, but you don't necessarily need to recruit as much. It might be a different element to be focusing on there. So even if you wanted to add something to that, that's fine.
I was just going to say, to add on to two things there, that number one, absolutely, everybody's AI is going to take everybody's jobs. And I think you're absolutely right in the fact that it's not going to necessarily take jobs away, but it may slow down the hiring process because, like you said, I've become more efficient with the people that I have. We've taken away those administrative tasks so they can focus on their job and they can spend more time on that job and get more done. So now I don't have to hire a second person that I was thinking about hiring to do that job and assist them in that workload because we don't need it anymore. Now it's on the burden of the owners and leadership and such to add more sales, more growth, and then you may need a second person to handle the throughput and the productivity, but not the administrative work. So that's number one. And number two, I also liken this to, I see a lot of people who implement Teams, Microsoft Teams. And I have nothing against Teams, but I prefer Zoom. And the reason I have a problem with Teams is not because of Teams itself, but because, again, people implement it immediately and there's no process, policies, and procedures of how we will manage teams. So people start creating these files and subgroups and groups, and it becomes a massive spider web of mess because no one stopped to formulate a plan, a policy and procedure on who has the authority to create a group and what's the process of creating a group so that we don't get this spiderweb mess. So again, it's the same thing with AI. What are our policies and procedures for someone to develop an AI, prove it out, and get it implemented, not just have people run amok creating this AI tool on their own, and all of a sudden, again, we have the same problem. It's kind of a spider web of chaos because now everybody's creating these things and we haven't set down the standardized process and procedure of how we develop and implement an AI solution. So it's again, planning up front saves you a lot of heartache down the road. It's a little bit, yes, takes time, takes effort, and may slow you down in the beginning, but once you then launch it properly, that process, the launch process, the implementation and using it becomes much faster than if you don't plan up front.
Yeah, and I think just two parallel things we were talking about there, but I think, just going back to the recruitment or maybe removal of administrative burden, the key thing there that really helps with staff retention as well, staff are actually doing jobs that they want to be doing, that they went into this career maybe to do, and their job satisfaction maybe returns and they're not just dragged down by the administrative burden that they never signed up for, but it just has ended up being a core part maybe of their job. So what I was going to just add on to that was one of my landscape architect background here. It was the metaphorical, tree growing from an acorn. If you start off trimming a tree early on, you've got a good chance of getting on top of it early. If you just let things grow really big, if you've got data all over the place, if you've got different people doing things in slightly different ways, it is so hard to get that back under control again. There's a great opportunity now for businesses that are looking at adopting AI to actually get this right from the start and start off with something small, which is so much more manageable and so much easier to grow in a sort of a regularized and structured sort of way, rather than jumping in with both feet, running off in one direction as fast as you can and then realizing this is going to be really hard to get back from now. So yeah, Yeah, I share your pain that you've obviously seen in your lifetime as well. Of it just becomes so hard, so you end up going down a route which is too hard to come back from, and it becomes resistance to actually going back and doing it properly from the start again. And obviously, then that has a knock-on effect: frustration with staff, frustration from the business leaders, frustration from the board members. You know, and it becomes really expensive to start again. So yeah, it's a great opportunity, I think.
You also then add resistance to change because we implemented something and it fell flat on its face and was a disaster. So those who are resistant to change will point it out and bring more people into their camp of, see, I told you it was going to fail. So you start developing a culture that is resistant to change and continuous improvement. So again, you don't want that. So you have to plan and make sure there's going to be success. There's always going to be problems. And I tell people all the time when we're implementing something, are we going to implement it perfectly? No. There will be things that we did not think of. There will be problems. However, if we can get most of our success and meet most of our goals, that is a success. And we identify the problems and fix those, that the change that we're making is successful. But I warn people all the time, change will not be implemented perfectly. There will be some problems. We'll deal with those and improve it. But if we can hit 80% of our goal, that is a big success. The 20% we planned for that it would fail or there would be bugs or problems, we can fix those because we anticipated that we would have problems. We just didn't know what problems we would run into.
Yeah. So we talked about preparation of processes and systems and direction through maybe policy as well. Have you got some, I don't know, insights into how businesses can prepare their data, maybe some of their data, the key sort of maybe performance indicators, but maybe just, core data there that maybe hasn't really been thought about too much because they've not been thinking about AI. You're an expert on AI, but have you got some insights into maybe what sort of businesses should take in relation to data, especially in the context of adopting new techniques, new technologies?
So the first thing with data, and it's even before you think of the AI or any kind of system, is number one, what do we want to measure? People don't think that through properly. Or again, like core values, they have like 20 metrics that they're measuring. It's like, really? You're going to report on all 20 of these metrics? 10 of them, or, are probably repeating the other 10. So it's just another way of presenting the same data. So let's pare down to the key metrics that really are going to tell you how you're performing. And then if there's something trend or something, you can always dig deeper into the other metrics that you were thinking about measuring, but they're not the key metrics. So it's first establishing those key metrics. Then when you have the key metrics, it's how are we going to measure it? What's the data we need to support this? There's also, is the key metric right? I have this problem with clients a lot that they're just counting defects. Number of defects doesn't tell me anything. It's the number of defects of what? Of what you produced, of what you touched, of what we need some kind of percentage or some kind of ratio to really make it have some meaning. So that's the first part, understanding the data. Then from there is if you can come up with where the data is being pulled from and the equations or the things that you need to analyze the data. Again, AI can do that very easily if it's programmed properly. And you have, again, established the foundation of before you put the inputs in. We know the metric, we know the equations, we know where the data is coming from. Now we can go in and prompt the AI and, like I said, program it and prompt it so that it properly pulls from the right areas, analyzes it properly, and spits it out to us. But that's, again, doesn't mean that we don't go in and either scrub the data or look at it or take a second look at it. But that first pass can easily be done by AI. Even scrubbing the data to make sure that it's proper can be done by AI. You can put in parameters and say, look, if this data point falls outside of these terms or these limits, flag it as questionable. So then again, a human can come in and go, was that a real data point or did somebody inverse the numbers, do something wrong, pick a wrong input? So at least it can identify and scrub the data for you. It can also then, once you've scrubbed the data and checked those data points and made it good, Then you can run it through the second part of AI, which again, like I said, can at least pull out some analysis for you to get you started.
Sure. Yeah, that's useful. So, I mean, more holistically, then, in maybe manufacturing, maybe in other areas of or sectors that you've been working in, looking maybe further afield, the next 2, 5, maybe even 10 years, we've seen some really lasting sort of changes, techniques that have come along for improving processes, improving efficiency, improving quality. What can you see? What do you think is going to change? Are there going to be any sort of fundamental new things coming out that are going to transform operational excellence in manufacturing or other industries? Can you see that happening? Can you see a direction?
I would say, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but it goes back to the leadership. If we don't see a change and an improvement in leadership, I don't care what system you put in. I don't care what you could put in, all AI, all automation, everything. But if we don't see an improvement in leadership, the organization is just going to have problems. And I'm not saying it's going to fail. It's just not going to be as successful as it could be. You're going to have problems. You're not going to be able to grow. I've seen them, especially with small and medium size, that their sales do this cyclical thing because, again, management really isn't managing and leadership isn't really leading the company to move forward. They're just doing the same old thing over and over again, and they're not thinking strategically. They're not thinking forward. They're just micromanaging the day-to-day, and that's not what leadership should be doing. You've hired people. If you hired them, you should entrust them to do the job that you've hired them for, or why did you hire them? So let them do their job. Again, pull yourself out of that day-to-day and think long-term, think more holistically of the organization, think strategically, and stop the micromanaging and hold people accountable. Walk the walk. If you have core values, if you have processes, if you have procedures, you're the first line of defense as a leader to uphold all of that. If you're not doing it, nobody else is going to. They're going to follow your lead. So if you violate procedures, they'll violate procedures. If you violate core values, they will. So that's the biggest problem I see, and I hope it improves. But if it doesn't, I just see the same problems reoccurring in the future. Even, again, with AI, with all of this technology advancement, because of everything we've discussed. If leadership isn't going to set up those foundations, everything, and make sure that it's implemented properly, and everything that we've discussed, that falls on leadership. And if they're not going to uphold that, all these systems are going to fail.
Of course. I mean, you're a leader yourself. You've obviously worked with a lot of leaders as well. I mean, can you pull out one sort of leadership lesson that you've either seen, or maybe it's happened to you? You know, there's been a lesson learned the hard way there. One that I don't know, really stands out for you.
To me, it just, again, falls back to that, the accountability of holding people accountable and making sure the right people are there. And if they're not, like you said, it's not that I'm like, hey, just fire them immediately. Work with them, see if they fit. Maybe you can coach them and mentor them, and they will turn the corner. But after a while, you can't keep putting your effort into something that is not going to change or produce or fit into your organization. And so I learned this the hard way as in my younger days as a leader, in hiring the wrong person. Everybody has done it. We think it's the right fit, and it just doesn't turn out to be. So it's going to happen, but you can learn from those mistakes and not keep repeating them. And unfortunately, I see that happen, is just, we're hiring bodies. That's not what we want to do. We want to hire the right bodies. So that, and then, like I said, I hold people accountable. When I was a leader, when I am in a position of leadership, whether it be fractional, working for an organization as a fractional part of their management team, I'm not afraid to hold people accountable to what they need to do, and you have to do that. And the other thing is show passion. I see a lot of leaders that they may show passion in a very bad way. They show anger, which sometimes is good, but if it's always anger, that is not good. But sometimes you do need to show that passion, that you're a little bit angry that people aren't following the procedures. You're a little bit angry that they're not abiding by the culture or something. Employees appreciate the passion, the good, the bad, the ugly. They see that the leader is engaged and passionate about the organization, and that then transcends to them being passionate about it as well. So again, that's probably the biggest thing that I think I've taken away is, one, hiring the right people, getting rid of the wrong people if you can't develop them and work with them, and it's just a kind of, it's not a fit. I'm not going to say it's a lost cause, it's just not a fit.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then the final thing is that showing the passion. People will follow a passionate leader, even if they think the leader may be kind of wrong or they're not sure the direction because maybe you didn't communicate it. But if they see the passion for the vision for the organization, they will follow passion and heart before they follow somebody that is very intelligent but has no passion.
Yeah, I think they're great insights. They really resonate with me as well. So yeah, Steve, finally, I ask everybody this question: can you recommend a book that our audience and business leaders especially should read? Maybe technical, maybe more holistic in your life. What and why? What?
Okay, so there are many leadership books that I could recommend and authors and all that. But if I were to narrow it down, especially from what we've been discussing today, I would have to probably recommend Brené Brown. And the book to start off with is probably her first book, although her latest book is very good. So I might cheat a little bit here and recommend two books. But
Yeah,
start
that's
off
fine.
with Daring Greatly. If you're a leader and you're having problems with the passion and the emotional side of your leadership, I think Daring Greatly is a great book for those leaders that are a little bit on the edge of, as Brené is a very big talker about, being vulnerable and being open and being that leader, which you have to be. I think that's a good one to start with. And then when you finish that one, go to her new book, which is Strong Ground. It's her latest release. And again, it kind of reinforces some of the Daring Greatly message. So again, I think it's a good combination. Start with the Daring Greatly, go to Strong Ground. And again, that helps with like I said, the more of the vulnerability of being a leader, how to deal with that, how to be vulnerable as a leader, and it just makes you stronger as a leader, more relatable to people as a leader.
They sound good. That sounds good. No, really appreciate that. I will get the links either directly or from you, and then I'll be able to share that with people. Steve, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your practical experiences. I loved hearing about them, and I'm sure our audience will too. It's been amazing to have you join me on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining me, Steve.
I appreciate it, Carl. It's been an honor, and I do hope that the audience takes something away. It's always, again, as a leader, as a speaker, you always want at least some, if not everything, at least a couple of points that the audience finds valuable. So I do hope they find value, or at least a couple of nuggets that are valuable for them and help them.
Absolutely sure they will, and I have too. So brilliant. Thank you, Steve. And for our audience, if you enjoyed this episode too, please follow Aligned Minds AI on LinkedIn for practical AI tips and updates on future episodes of Aligned on AI. I will share the details of today's podcast and guest on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So thanks for listening or viewing, and we will see you next time.